Right, we're halfway through Cybersecurity Month, and you can't open a paper or turn on the TV without hearing about the latest high profile data security leak. Security issues are certainly something we've covered before, so today I'm very pleased to welcome Danvers Baillieu, Chief Operating Officer of Hide My Ass. Danvers, thanks very much for taking your time out today. Would you like to take a moment to tell us a bit about Hide My Ass and what you do within the organisation?
Yeah, sure. So Hide My Ass is a VPN service. VPN stands for Virtual Private Network, and that means we have a network of servers around the world which our users can connect to. And when they do that, that creates a secure tunnel between themselves and the internet, which gives them another layer of security, and it also allows them to change their online identity or location to the same as any of our servers around the world, and giving them another layer of privacy when they do that. I'm the COO. I kind of run the company on a day-to-day basis. We're part of a bigger organization, AVG Technologies, who you might be aware of, who provide a very popular antivirus software.
Okay. And it seems today as though we can't go through a day without some kind of high-profile data breach taking place. What do you think large organisations need to be doing to decrease the chances of what seems to be very sensitive data being leaked?
Well, I mean, the problem is all of these data hacks happen in different ways, and obviously, even large organizations aren't completely safe because, they need to share their data or use their data in lots of different ways, often with different partners and so on. But generally, the guiding rules are when you're a big company is to take multiple layers of precautions, and that means dealing with reputable suppliers and partners who have their own processes well sorted out, having robust internal systems that prevent your own employees from doing stupid things, as well as having good systems yourself that are well protected from the hackers who are out there.
And do you think that on the whole, the large organisations are doing enough at the moment, or do you still think they're sort of vulnerable to having been caught with their pants down, if you like?
Well, look, I mean, threats come from left field all the time for big organisations, but I think on the whole, these issues are well understood, and big companies on the whole take things incredibly seriously and have good IT people and level often who understand the threats and what needs to be done to protect against them. I think the issue often comes whereby a lot of the things they put in place make people's jobs harder to do, and things become more cumbersome, and then inevitably you get occasions where people take shortcuts or bend the rules to make their lives easier, and that's often the source of these breaches.
Yeah.
The breaches like the Ashley Madison one, which was very very well covered in the media. I mean, there's an example of a private company that was obviously being complacent and didn't have the sort of measures in place that it should have done.
Yeah, I think they were sort of suffering from sort of obvious mistakes there with the storage of information, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when people, your average user, if you like, when they're using websites that require the entry of personal information, they're kind of placing their trust in these companies that they're taking steps to secure the information. But what steps should people be taking to secure their details?
Well, for a start, don't place your trust in something that looks completely dodgy, and use a little bit of discretion about the sort of information that you hand over, and ask yourself, particularly when there's a long form asking for data, do I really need to hand this over? If a field is mandatory, do you need to give real information? A lot of sites, for example, ask you for things like your mother's maiden name. There's nothing that says you have to give them your mother's maiden name. You can make up a name and give them. I mean, it makes it maybe you may have to keep track of what you've put. If you need to quote it back at them at a later date. But you don't necessarily have to give real details every single time. Even simple things like setting up temporary email accounts or so on can help. The other thing, really straightforward, is passwords. And people can't go on about this enough, but it's not to use the same password over and over again on lots of different sites. You need to vary it. You need to change your passwords. You need to refresh them from time to time. But the trick is, don't use the same password that you use on your bank account to log into some site that you've never really heard of, but has maybe got a funny cat video on it that you want to click through and watch.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I find myself that even as clever as some passwords appear to be, I think I found with LinkedIn, Adobe. Adobe had an issue with password leakage a few years ago, and you could go and check online, and interestingly enough, the password that I thought no one else would use, I think 4 other people had. Now, I might have had a secure phrase, memorable phrase that wouldn't get my password released, but the other 4 people probably did. So it's just being careful, really, isn't it?
And there are lots of good programs out there that will help you with your passwords and so on. Another way, if you know how to set up an encrypted file on your computer and to store them securely in some way, that means that file can't be easily reached on your computer. And then it's just sort of basic hygiene, of making sure that you lock your computer, that you have a part when somebody turns it on, they have to at least put a password in. Somebody nicks your phone or your computer, you want to make it hard for them to get stuff off it, and not have an obvious PIN or something like that that allows them straight in, and then they can start messing around with your accounts.
Yeah. So if we move on to monitoring of internet usage, the government appears to be eager to monitor our internet usage in order to, in their words, protect our sort of national security. Do you think there's a need for governments to become involved in this area, or do you think it's more important to educate the public to the risks of using the internet and how they could be protecting themselves?
Well, I don't think the government monitoring is to sort of protect us, from what we're doing on the internet. I think the way they frame it is, they're protecting us from the people who are talking about doing bad things, probably offline, such as terrorism and other sorts of crime. And really, I take the view that it's taking a sledgehammer to crack a nut. And it's a disproportionate response, and governments obviously want to measure and monitor things that they can, and they see the internet as something, this huge treasure trove of information, and they want to know exactly what we're doing. But I think we'd be all horrified if they said, well, you know what, we've got this new system that allows us to put a camera in everybody's house or in every corner of every pub and listen to every conversation you have. No way would we accept that. That's sort of George Orwell, Big Brother territory. We wouldn't accept that. So we don't accept that offline. So I don't see why we need to accept it online.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. With regard to sort of parents as well, what steps should parents be taking to try to ensure the sort of ongoing safety of their children online?
Well, this gets into really tricky territory, particularly because, there are a lot of children out there who are far more tech savvy than their parents. So any countermeasures you put in place, you probably need to get your children to help them set them up in the first place. But without being too flippant about it, there are obviously basic things that you can do. A lot of internet providers like BT provide filtered internet that you can have sort of parental controls on your home internet. I think it's really comes down to good parenting at the end of the day, talking to your children about what they do online and the dangers that can occur online. Not every threat is going to come from a site that's been filtered out for you by BT. It could be a chat on a forum that is otherwise innocent. And it's about understanding, both educating your own children, talking to them about the threats, and then sort of being generally aware of what they're up to. So, not letting them have laptops in their bedroom that you don't know what they're doing late at night and so on. And maybe that involves turning off your home router at times and making sure they go to sleep, and aren't up chatting to their not necessarily. not necessarily it's a problem chatting to their friends other than the fact they're missing some sleep, but it means they are to other people who maybe they shouldn't be chatting to, if I can put it like that.
Yeah, I think personally, again, that I think that it's about openness with parents. I think if parents are open with their children about these things, then there's a level of trust that then can be built between the parents and the children that, you know, can lead to safer online usage. I think like you say, if you send them up, if they go upstairs, shut the door and go on their computers, then, you know, you need to be aware. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and you know what's appropriate. I mean, I've got daughters. I've got twins who are 9, and what's appropriate for them now is not necessarily going to be appropriate for them in a you know, in terms of how I protect them. It's not necessarily going to be appropriate in a few more years. And you can't just have a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to protecting kids. But at the same time, I want them to use the internet. I want them to learn. I want them to explore. I want them to be entertained by what's out there. And so the only way you can really do that is through you know, bringing them up properly. Yeah. At the end of the day, there's no golden technological answer. There are obviously good solutions out there that will help keep people safe. There's some interesting tracking tools out there that your kids can have on their phones, so you can have a better idea of where they are. But none of these things are effective if the kids really want to get around them.
No. And so moving to if you're outside of your home, and I think this really, your product comes into its own here, is when you're using public Wi-Fi access points, you know, how can we be sure that when we're on a public access point, our connection is safe?
Well, I don't think you can be. I mean, that would be... you know, that's the fundamental point about a public Wi-Fi access point, is that you know really very little about it. You don't know what other people are doing on the point. So, you know, this is where using something like a VPN is absolutely crucial, because, you know, it allows you to hide what you're doing over that connection. So if anyone is tapping into what you're doing, all they see is lines and lines of encrypted code, which basically means they can't see what you're up to and steal your passwords and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So sort of summing things up, what would you consider the biggest threat to our online security at the moment? I know it's a very broad question, but in your position, what would you think would be the biggest threat?
Well, you know, there's low-level stuff and there's high-level stuff, and the low-level stuff is more prevalent, but the high-level stuff is obviously, you know, more damaging when it happens. But I think, you know, there's been a lot in the press. There have been a lot of cases where, you know, people have just got defrauded over the internet, and I think, you know, you just can't reiterate enough that, you know, people have got to understand that if something looks too good to be true, then that's probably the case. And I think, you know, the papers have stories every single week with somebody losing their life savings or something like that because they've responded to an email or whatever. And it's the oldest trick in the book, you know, these scams, and, you know, that in itself is fairly devastating. You know, at a lower level, obviously, you know, you can get viruses, you can get problems on your computer. You know, if you get a virus, your computer can be, you know, hijacked and used in a sort of hacking episode or something like that, which is obviously unhelpful, but you may never really know about it yourself. So yeah, I would still say probably for most people the number one threat is falling for some kind of scam.
I think you're right. I think that is it the Nigerian 419 scam? Is it? I think it's called that. I could be wrong. With the Crown Prince wants to release his funds with your help. Also, I found recently in the last week, I had a phone call on a telephone line here that I don't use, telling me that my computer was sending error messages out and that they would be able to fix it. I think they're the most common, and they seem to be the ones that people still continuously fall for. And I don't know what needs to be done to educate people that these things really aren't. I wonder where people are sometimes, because they're quite public, especially the telephone calls from purported engineers telling you your computer's got problems and they can fix it. I think that, you know, they are big problems.
Yeah, and you know, it's all very well telling people what to do, but frankly, the people who fall for these scams are not necessarily getting the message in the first place. So, but no, this is all, those are the sort of things that are going on. And I think actually the ones that was worrying me the most in a way is the stories that you hear at the moment where people are about to complete on a property transaction. Somebody's calling their solicitors, pretending to be them, and saying, "Oh, I've got new bank details," or vice versa, and saying, "I'm a solicitor. Our bank details have changed. Transfer the money to a different account."
Yeah.
And there've been various cases reported about, and I think that's absolutely terrifying because it doesn't necessarily rely on you to fall for the scam. It's the firm of solicitors or something that you're using has fallen for the scam, and obviously again, the catastrophic effects on people if the money they've saved to buy a house or something goes missing.
Yeah, it's just appalling, those kind of things, the worry that it causes and everything. Yeah. Well, thanks ever so much for your time today. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure the listeners to the podcast will be as interested as I've been. So thanks ever so much, Danvers.
No problem.
Okay. Cheers.